Precious Lord, take my hand, lead me on, let me stand. I'm tired, I'm weak, I'm worn through the storm, through the night. Lead me on to the light. Precious Lord, take my hand and lead me on.
So, Andre Leon Talley is a verb. We say this because of his transcendent dynamism. Mr. Talley is universally recognized as a fashion and style force, but we know him to be much more. Where many explain that they do it for the culture, there is no exaggeration in saying that Andre Leon Talley very much is the culture. His achievements are significant. A graduate of North Carolina Central University with a BA in French literature and of Brown University with a master's in French literature, Mr. Talley began his professional career under the direction of Harper's Costume Institute of the Metropolitan Museum of Modern Art and Vogue icon Diana Vreeland. From there, Mr. Talley wrote fashion for Andy Warhol's Interview magazine, where his journalism, unparalleled substance, and knowledge placed him firmly in the industry of fashion, where his constructions and deconstructions of expressive elements of style earned him profound influence for decades at Vogue, where he was the magazine's fashion news director, creative director, American editor at large, and contributing editor. But as significant as the professional positions and achievements are, Mr. Talley's dynamism is rooted in the investment of his grandmother, Ms. Betty Francis Davis, his ancestors, and a faith found in the Black church. So it seems fitting then, and is a distinct pleasure, to welcome Andre Leon Talley to Morehouse College and a special Crown Forum conversation. Mr. Talley, welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Rice.
Absolutely.
Thank you for having me. It's a great pleasure.
Oh, it's an honor to have you with us.
And to be with Morehouse College, a great, legendary, and historical college where great people have come out of Morehouse, including the pastor of my church, Reverend Calvin O'Bus III, to whom I dedicated the book.
Yes, sir.
After the Abyssinian Baptist Church. I just wanted to say that we should let people know that the person who was singing Precious Lord was James Baldwin in a cappella.
Yes, sir.
That is the voice of James Baldwin singing Precious Lord, which I just discovered recently, and I sent it to you, and I thought it would be a beautiful prelude to our talk.
Absolutely. And so let's get into that a little bit. Can you tell me what you think of when you hear James Baldwin singing these words, and then kind of go into the significance of literature in general?
First of all, when I heard James Baldwin singing these words, about 2 mornings ago, when I got up before I had breakfast, a friend had discovered these on Amazon, on the internet. And I had never heard James Baldwin sing a cappella. And of course, you know, James Baldwin was a young child minister. He grew up in the church. Faith was very important to him. But to hear him singing this song written by Thomas Dorsey, the late, great Thomas Dorsey, who is also a Black African-American hero in the world of music, gospel music. He started as a jazz performer. He lost his wife. He was on the road traveling. He lost his wife. And he made this song, created this song, Precious Lord. Precious Lord is an untapped resource, no matter who sings it, but particularly hearing James Baldwin sing it links it to his literature. And in these days, particularly during the pandemic, this year, I have devoted my entire summer to reading almost everything that I can get my hands on that's been written by James Baldwin. Mm-hmm. Because his words, his genius, his ability to talk about in his literature the systemic racism in our country, the injustices to Black people, are so apt in the world today, what we're going through with these beautiful Black men, no matter what walk of life they're from, Black men who are being lynched in a modern way. So when I hear James Baldwin singing Precious Lord, it's the same as when I hear Mahalia Jackson singing Precious Lord when I was a child. Whenever I heard the choir in my home church singing Precious Lord, it is an anthem that one must carry with one in order to survive in the world, as I say in my book, Chiffon Trenches, to survive the trenches of America, the trenches of racism and the trenches of inequality.
So this grounds you. It helps to ground you. His literature that you're going
it helps
through
to ground,
again.
Grounds me. Oh, totally. It helps to give me the anchor to sustain everything I must go through to survive in the world of fashion, in the world as a Black man, in the world as a Black educated man who's gone to colleges, who has a degree, who has a resume, but through all of my life, I've experienced pain. I've experienced a great deal of joy. But I had to fashion my life through many, many trenches of pain. I had to get up out of that trench and walk across that trench edge and continue to survive in this very, very, very cruel world we're living in today. Literature has always been the basis. So I discovered the power of books that can take you, the message, the journey, the literature of Toni Morrison, the narrative of Frederick Douglass, the slave narrative.
Yes.
Which is an important, I have it downstairs on my table somewhere. These are the things that can help you and inspire you and help you to aspiration. James Baldwin, you can read James Baldwin. When did he die? 1987?
Yeah.
It's 2000. And I recommend that you read Eddie Glaudy's book on Begin Again. And if you can get anything that has the name James Baldwin on it, read it.
So is this something we talk about it in being an anchor in terms of your traversing a life of pain and of tremendous challenge, right?
Yeah.
So and you talk about Toni Morrison, you talk about Frederick Douglass, you talk about Eddie Glaude. I'm curious how this literature translates into fashion. I think of fashion as art. I think of it as a performance of identity. Now that's the lens through which I'm looking because of my psychological background, right? I might be putting too much on it because I know that I say fashion as art, as a shield, as a performance. But I know that I've at least heard you say that fashion is not art.
No.
So how does this
inspire art? It can inspire to be artistic, but and when I look through these authors, because of the power of knowledge of what they have written, and it speaks to me. And it's not that I fashion my life after the novels or the writings of James Baldwin. It's just like when people, your grandmother or your aunt, you'll see her sitting there on the porch in the summer reading the Holy Bible.
Yes.
And quietly. She's looking for the tools and the word and the wisdom of the Holy Bible to give her strength to get through a day or through a crisis. And that's what these great bodies of literature have always done for me, no matter what they are. And I am inspired by literature. I am inspired by Maya Angelou. I know why the caged bird sings. Yes. When you realize that what she went through before she was raped and she didn't speak for 5 years.
Yes.
And then she becomes an adult. She's a dancer. She's a singer. She's a playwright. She travels the world. She's lived in Liberia or Nigeria, whatever. And this woman becomes a writer, unbeknown she was a poet, and she writes this beautiful novel, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. This is what's important. This is what's key. And all Black folk need to read some Black folks literature. All Black people need to read some Black people. Zora Neale Hurston. I mean, when I discovered Zora Neale Hurston in her life, what she went through, her journey, and she was part of the Harlem Renaissance. I mean, she struggled. She was struggling a lot of times, couldn't hardly pay the rent. But this was a great writer. Langston Hughes. Everybody who's Black who has achieved something in literature has to be recognized and acknowledged because it's part of who we are.
So how does this translate to you and your work? So how does this translate to your Black excellence? How does it translate to your curation and framing of persons and of art? Or does it? Did it just ground you and anchor you and allow you to be the
grounds and anchors me, but it in going forth, I'm not necessarily saying I'm inspired by one specific body of work of literature, but it does have some sense of my DNA, because having read these authors, having seen the stories, particularly Toni Morrison, the narratives of Toni Morrison and Maya Angelou, having seen these great things, any great Black African-American artist is inspiring to me and goes through and creates a fashionable tool that I can therefore become more powerful in my work. Not necessarily am I always inspired by French literature. I've read a lot of French literature, but just for instance, I'm going to skip straight over to Kara Walker. Kara Walker is a great inspiration. She's a Black artist, and it is extraordinary how Kara Walker's silhouettes and her sculpture speaks to me and can inspire me. The monumentality of a Kara Walker is exceptional. Kehinde Wiley, the monumentality of Blackness is what becomes a part of my message in my fashion, in my statement, in my creative work.
So tell me this: where is the power there? You talk about the importance of style. Style can get you through the revolving door, up the escalator, right? But your knowledge and deep understanding allows you to stay there. And I'm gonna conflate a little bit of what you said. It gives you an opportunity to have power. What is the power that you've had? You talk about the literature giving you power. What power do you have you had in terms of the culture?
The power is knowledge. As Auntie Mame and Rosalind Russell said in the film Auntie Mame, Mr. Babcock, knowledge is power. My power comes from the knowledge of these cultures or these systems or these strategies of the 18th century of North African literature. That is wherein my power comes from living and having read and having been able to explain and express the power of the spoken and written word and artistic people such as Kara Walker gives me the power to have a place in the world of fashion that is perhaps unique, because in the world of fashion, you're only as good as your last project. So when my creative projects depend on creating Naomi Campbell as Scarlett O'Hara instead of a white woman, but creating Naomi Campbell and having Manolo Blahnik play the gardener in a spoof in Vanity Fair, which was critically acclaimed by the New York Times. This comes from a certain sense of power. And I did that spoof before that lady wrote that small book called The Wind Done Gone, Miss Randall is her name? Alice Randall. So this was done way before Alice Randall, and this was a very groundbreaking essay that I did with photographs by Karl Lagerfeld, where I flipped the script. I had all the blacks being the aristocratic and all the white people were enslaved or plantation workers. And this gives me the power to get that done in Vanity Fair, because when I proposed the idea to Graydon Carter, who was then editor of Vanity Fair, a great editor, he trusted me to resolve that issue, resolve that essay. And it was brilliantly done by photographs, and it was beautifully done, and it was critically acclaimed in the New York Times by the late Amy Spindler. So
but what difference does that make? So I hear that because you're talking about the personal power that you have, absolutely. But how does that translate into impact? Because that made a difference. It wasn't only just critically acclaimed, but that imagery. What does that mean for folks to see that?
They see something they couldn't have probably imagined for themselves. They see something unseen, therefore it becomes original and unique. Therefore, as I say, my knowledge is power, and I use that knowledge to create impact and to resonate, to create people respond to what I write, my critical analysis of fashion, based on my history of fashion. I could not have been on the front row of Yves Saint Laurent's couture show in 1978 in Paris, my first big couture show. I've been to Paris before the fashion shows, but I then landed on the front row as Paris fashion editor of Women's Wear Daily. I couldn't have been on that front row in January of 1978 for the great Yves Saint Laurent show. Mr. Fairchild, who was the editor, my boss, named it the Broadway collection. But Yves Saint Laurent was inspired by Porgy and Bess,
Yes.
the folk opera of Gershwin. He had never been to the South, but his clothes, when I went to see him, and I said, Mr. Saint Laurent, what is the inspiration behind these clothes? What did you see? What painting did you see? What music were you listening to? He said, I was listening to Porgy and Bess in my Volkswagen Beetle on the bridge coming across to work in the morning. And therefore, the man's listened to Porgy and Bess, those beautiful arias, and he creates one of the most beautiful collections in the history of fashion. January 1978, and that's when I wrote my first critical review of a couture show. And in my book, you see a letter from Deanna Vreeland talking about it in the frontispiece. Yes. Because therefore, I am able to connect literature, art, dance, movement, poetry, through all those various moments of creativity. I can then bring something into how I see the world of fashion, how I see a collection, how I see a designer interpreting fashion. And that's what has kept me going through all these decades and years.
So how do you hope that it's received? The thing that I think of,
I never think about how it's going to be received. I don't think about how it's going to be received. I think about how am I going to do it, and if I'm happy, I know some other people will be happy too.
But I don't know, Mr. Talley. I don't know about that, because you're so well rooted and anchored in this literature, in this perspective, in the Black South, in the Black culture, right? Mm-hmm. That it would seem that your expectation would be that through your Black excellence, someone is going to get something that allows them to be anchored in some way. Oh, and the reason that I was so intent and so happy that you would be in conversation is because the way that I recognized and understood you was through a very, very thin popular cultural lens. But I sat down and spent some time looking through the Gospel according to Andre. And it was so very impactful because we really are talking about Black excellence, and your reflection, your reflexivity on Black excellence demonstrates that you weren't doing a thing just to do a thing. You were doing something that you loved. You were doing something that you clearly sacrificed for, but it was in a tradition. It wasn't waywardly done. It was in a tradition, again, of our ancestors, your grandmother, your great-grandmother, China, your folks who entrusted you to that family dynamic and that development. So it would seem to me that, you're not caring. You're saying that you don't care doesn't mean that you don't understand it as being of consequence, the work that you do. Is that fair?
That's fair. That's fair.
Okay.
But everything that was a part of my childhood stays with me every day. My roots are never forgotten. My humble roots in the deep, deep Jim Crow South. My public school teachers, Wanda Garrett, still alive. The late Cynthia P. Smith, who taught me French on 4 levels. So all of these things remain very important to me because these people impressed me with their knowledge and their finesse of sharing with me as a student and observing and listening. I was a great listener. I listened to what my teachers had to say, and I was inspired by the way they looked and the way they walked. Mrs. Garrett had a great gray skirt, very full circular skirt and stiletto heels. I was as inspired by her look going down the hall as what she said in the class. And I realized that fashion is a very important every very important part of everyone's life. Fashion is the way you express yourself. You have shown me the way you are expressed today. You have a pochette in your pocket, matching your accessorizing with your bow tie. And so therefore you have given me a symbol of how you see yourself in the world. And this is how I always dressed in a very unique way, because my grandmother allowed me to do whatever I wanted to. She spoiled me properly. And I'm glad she did. I do not regret that she spoiled me, except I don't know how to cook. But everything, church life was very important, and church experience and spirituality and faith. And all of these things have gone throughout my entire life, as they do today. Church is a very important part of my life. It's the nucleus of my life. I did a Zoom talk with the book club of my church, and I said, the most important thing was when I was coming up, I didn't think about, here I am, Andre Leon Talley on the front row of fashion with the Sun Around show. I kept thinking, who am I going to make proud? Who's going to be proud of me? Not only my grandmother, my mother, and my father, but my church family. But people are going to be proud to see me on the front row of the Sun Around. And so therefore, throughout my entire life, I always tried to set an example of excellence that I would hope would make people proud. Because at one point, I was the only one sitting there on the front row in that position of power. But that power came through my knowledge and through my ability to translate that knowledge into an actuality of critical analysis of fashion, reporting of fashion, reporting of society, profiling in celebrities, communicating with celebrities, having a dialogue with them. And that kind of confidence can only come through having a sense of grounding based on your background. I carry with me the weight of so many generations and passages of people from North Carolina, including my father's side of the family as well as my mother's side of the family.
And so during those decades that you spent, that you've spent interacting with celebrity, being in high fashion, was that thread apparent to those people who were around you? Did they know of this anchoring? Do you? I don't think
they didn't make it evident to me that they were apparent that was part of this. No, I'm not sure that was ever realized by people that I communed with. I mean, no, I never had a conversation with some of the celebrities, but I know people gravitated to me because I knew what I was talking about. As I always said, do your homework, and I did not open my mouth unless I knew what I was talking about.
But you also, the thing is that there also is this, I don't know. So again, you demonstrated self and Black excellence. I keep going back to this through your knowledge, through this understanding of responsibility that you had to
set an example for all people, not only Black people, but to set an example to show all those people who were doubting, why am I sitting on the front row? This African American man, why is he sitting there? And I had to set the example through my writing, through my bylines, that I deserve to be in that position as Paris fashion editor at Women's Wear Daily. I deserve to be in Vogue as the first African American male ever to be named creative director of American Vogue.
So how do you demonstrate this fearlessness, right? Because one of the things that
by confidence, you have confidence.
But you say that you've always been afraid of the world, right? Afraid of the real world.
But so how do you, Dr. Rice? Let me just cut right into you.
Teach me.
Confidence. You can show confidence and feel very insecure inside. Clothes are my armor, and so my deportment is one of confidence and not provocative intimidation, but confidence to walk tall. And as Maya Angelou said, don't bow to anyone but God. I exuded confidence in everything I did as a young African-American person who was Paris fashion editor under the age of 30, which was a groundbreaking career position.
So you're able to exude confidence even though there might be kernels or platelets of insecurity, right? But
Yes.
that doesn't stop you from stepping
Never. That
forward.
didn't stop me. That never stops me.
Why not?
My
Why
faith,
didn't it stop you?
my faith. Simply my faith.
Okay.
You know, I got up and I simply walked in faith. Faith, love, and prayer. Found love in friends and prayer and faith. You wake up every morning, you thank God, and I start praying. I just stay prayed up. I just say, it's one of my minister friends, a female, Reverend Marshall, Chairman Marshall said, stay prayed up. Just stay prayed up. Stay prayed up, and you will get through the day. You will get through your life.
I think that if you're a person who's grounded and anchored in faith, right, in love, then the work that you do is not work. It's not a job. It's a type of ministry.
Yes. It's like a circuit rider, minister, a circuit rider. Alvin Ailey took from his childhood the memories of the church in the South and turned it into a masterpiece that has been shown in Russia. It is one of the greatest, most popular modern dance movements. When Alvin Ailey's Revelations is on stage, that is an emotional experience that is unique.
Yes.
That you have that experience of seeing Revelations. It's spiritual. It's dynamic. It's powerful. It's emotional. When I first saw Judith Jameson in that solo dance with the white umbrella and wade in the water and that big white skirt and the big white panels held behind the screen and floating on the stage like waves, wade in the water, this impacted my whole life. In my aesthetical view about beauty and dance and movement and the power of the black body. Judith Jamison was one of the greatest solo stars of Alvin Ailey, and she still is alive today. Alvin Ailey is one of the greatest American choreographers.
So how does a physicist step to this? What if we're talking to some...
Well, I don't know how physicists step to this. That's a big, tough question. I don't know how a scientist does it, but I know how a poet does it, an author, a novelist, a choreographer, a musician.
Yes.
I go back to Carol Walker. Carol Walker did a beautiful sculpture called the Sphinx, the Sugar Sphinx, the Sphinx Mama. Are you aware of that piece?
Yes.
The domino was made out of sugar. And it looked like the Aunt Jemima head of the Aunt Jemima pancake syrup brand logo. Yes. This Sphinx was extraordinary. And it was part Sphinx and part Black Mama. But it said so much more about the history of Black women, servitude, enslaved cultures taken from one land to the other. It was done in a Domino sugar factory in Brooklyn. Mm-hmm. It was made out of sugar. Mm-hmm. And I think it was up for about 4 months. This was one of the most powerful things I've ever seen.
As I'm asking the question about what that means to a physicist, it's kind of unfair, but you've already given the answer.
It was very unfair.
But you've already given the answer because you've talked about how it is that, hearing Baldwin it anchors you. It's like listening to Mahalia Jackson, being able to see these beautiful pieces of art allow you. Yes.
And Untapped, and that was a discovery just this week that I shared with you. When you hear Mahalia Jackson singing Precious Lord, when you hear Willie Mae Ford Smith singing Precious Lord, when you hear Aretha Franklin singing Precious Lord, each person has interpreted individual landscapes pertinent to what they have experienced at that moment. And it becomes art when Mahalia Jackson sings it, but it is also great art when Aretha Franklin sings it. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And therefore, each person becomes a great artist to be respected. The moment of the modern people who have got impact, Kanye West, back in his first albums, he had great, they were genius. The great albums, School, what was it? School Out.
College Dropout.
College Dropout. This was a masterpiece. This was as strong as a Jacob Lawrence portrait, a painting. Jacob Lawrence is a great artist. You can paint, you can express yourself. If you want to pick up a paintbrush or pick up a pen and start composing music or writing a novel, you can, based on who you are and who you will become through an evolution of experiences based on your journey through life.
And do you understand yourself as an artist as well?
I've come to understand that I have a talent. I've come to understand that at the age of 71.
I'm thinking of art in as an expression of love, and personal art as an expression of self-love. So even I'm going back again to this physicist, if they can be grounded in your writing of In the Chiffon Trenches, or they can be inspired by Marvin Gaye's What's Going On, and they can be they can be
The beat of school dropout. The beat
yes.
of Kanye West's dropout.
They can be contemplative through Jay-Z's 444. They can be inspired by the Carters going to the Louvre and looking at the juxtaposition of black bodies against all of this.
Yes.
So those are all things that they can then kind of translate their own art in whatever it is that they do and they love. So I'm curious. I'm curious also, though, we bring up Kanye West, and there's some tension I have there because I understand him. I have all of his albums, right? I understand him as being tremendously talented, as are many artists, tremendously talented. Are there certain responsibilities that Black artists have in particular to their community, considering the context and the space within which we're placed right now? One of the things that I think is so encouraging is to hear how it is that in the Chiffon Trenches you talk about racism being in the epidermis. You know, that juxtaposition, of course, it's in the epidermis because of melanin, right? But racism being in the epidermis and being a constant, you say it 2 times, and talking about this issue of the construct of white supremacy in the original sin. And we see how it is that's manifest in this really, really critical time that we're in presently. To what extent do artists who are in public spaces, right, who are embraced by popular culture, to what extent do they have a responsibility around their art to ensure that they're not doing damage to the communities that they come from? And to what extent do we have to hold them accountable?
I think that's a very fair question. I would say yes. We have to be held accountable. We have to be responsible artists or writers. I would say yes, you are completely correct. I would say that Mr. West, in those fabulous first albums, became this incredible artist, Grammy winner. But in his personal life, particularly today, he cannot be held accountable. We must pray for him. I always say, Mr. West needs prayer. People need to pray for each other. When you see Mr. West in the Trump Oval Office, when you see Mr. West running for president, when you see Mr. West lashing out at his wife in public, crying, you have to pray for this man. George Floyd, when I saw that video, 8 minutes, 46 seconds, Dave Chappelle,
absolutely,
in that moment of when he did that special show for a small audience, became a responsible Black artist, a genius. That's right. Although I think Dave Chappelle is a genius, then Dave Chappelle rose to the mountaintop on that one monologue on 8 minutes, 46 seconds, giving us the evolution of his background. One of his ancestors was a great minister of the South, et cetera, bringing it up to, there was something like 8 minutes, 46 seconds. It was just, when I saw that, it was so powerful.
You talked about the time he was born. I think he said he was born at 8:46. Yes,
8:46 a.m. in the morning. You have to have a responsibility for your people, because if we have to protect and take care of each other. If we don't take care of each other, nobody's going to do it for us. We have to uplift Eddie Glaude Jr. We have to uplift Isabel Wickelson for Cass in the Immigrants, Gone Migrants, that other book she got the Pulitzer Prize for. You have to uplift even, John Meacham, who's white, who wrote this book on John Lewis, and John Lewis wrote the epilogue just before he died. You have to uplift these people. And you just have to say, what am I doing? I have to make sure that this speaks to my people. This is why I dedicated the book to Dr. Calvin Obutz III. Because people were surprised, but I am so inspired by him and his ministry. But that he is in his own way an artist.
Yes, I like that.
He is an orator. I compare him to Bossuet. Monsieur Boussuet was an 18th century orator. And I'm sorry, Mr. Dr. Buskin, he can say very powerful things in his pulpit. He uses his pulpit as his platform to share with his congregation the importance of Black equality, Black pride, Black faith, all the important values in life. And I think we do have a responsibility. This is why I was happy to share this moment with Morehouse College, of whom no one has ever asked me to do anything at Morehouse College. And I said yes immediately. I said yes. And, we have a responsibility to speak to our people. We are teachers. Our voice is very powerful. The written voice, the spoken voice, the voice in movement, the voice of the body, the voice of dance, the voice of musicality. The musicality of the Black body is extraordinary. When Black people dance, the musicality of the human body is amazing.
Yes,
it's just absolutely amazing.
I was reading the New York Times piece on you from a couple of years back. Mm-hmm. Is it the reinvention of Andre Talley or
something? Whatever the title is,
something like this. And in it, there are a couple of things that struck me. Was first of all, you talked about how Arctic the fashion industry can be, and the fashion industry is not going to take care of you. But you had said something. You said fashion does not take care of its people. No one is going to take care of me, but I'm going to take care of myself.
That's correct.
I think that shows a profound and interconnected self-love, this investment in faith. I really appreciated that. And then I was thinking about, there was a quote in there from Whoopi Goldberg where she says that you were so many things that you weren't supposed to be, all of these firsts, right? Mm-hmm. And I understand and respect that. But I was also thinking about how it is that you also are so many things that you were supposed to be. And what I mean in that respect is the way that you have paid homage, and I love the language that you use because it's so connected to us, right? The way that you have paid homage to our ancestors, the way that you have respected your elders, your grandmother, mama, who you were raised by, as well as your great grandmother, but also your aunts, your cousins who were your best friends. And then I think it would be so easy for folks to kind of frame your parents in a certain way, but talking about how it is that they were in Washington, D.C., and they were working, they were trying, they were doing what they could do to make sure that you were in these spaces. Mm-hmm. I'm thinking of all the things that you're supposed to be, because in that faith, in that investment in your ancestors, that reinvestment in them, you demonstrate their dreams, right? You are the dreams of our ancestors. You are the dreams of the enslaved. And there they are. I know Tamron Hall did something with you at BAM, and also you were on her show as well. And in one of those spaces, she talked about how you were a Black superhero, which is accurate. But you're supposed to be a Black superhero because you are the reflection of those Black superheroes who came before you. So I'm curious in how it is that you understand that monologue that I gave, because there are so many things that you weren't supposed to be, but because you were so truly grounded in your faith and in your culture and who you were built to be, that allows you to do all of these kind of unprecedented things. Does that make sense?
Great sense. The moments of ancestral recall are permanent in my head every day. Ancestral recalling the examples set before me, the example of my great-grandmother, the example of my grandmother, the example of my mother and my father who was struggling. My father was struggling. My father was so extraordinary, man. He was a taxi driver by night. He worked at the U.S. Patent Office by day. And he wanted me, when I was in college, he wanted me to have a summer job. And he knew that to make the difference when you went to get a federal job in one of the federal departments in Washington, D.C., he knew to stand in line with me to get an application. All the other teenagers would be in line. They wouldn't have their parents. But this was the black man that would stand in line and walk up with me to get an application. And he would say something, this is my son, and he wants a job. And then I got a big job at the Lincoln Memorial. And then I had a job at Fort Washington. So I have to give credit to all the ancestors before me who struggled, who toiled, who did not have the opportunities. I carry their strength. I remember my great-grandmother China in the backyard, a woman killing a live chicken. Do you know what that is when you're a child and you see the chicken's head and this chicken is running around, blood coming out of it? I mean, that sounds gory, but that was a woman of resilience. I also remember her doing beautiful things like stirring white sheets from the bed in a pot, a black cast iron pot, under a peach tree with a stick, a branch from a peach tree. The water is so hot she can't put her hands in it. Stirring the clothes in boiling pot heat to get those clothes deep sanitized, deep cleansed, hanging them on the line, putting it in blue rinse. So all these images stay with me as I go through life, because I only can say that my great family, my family unit was powerful. My Uncle George used to make beautiful peach ice cream on the back porch in the summertime. We'd go to the family revivals. We'd go for the repast, and he had an ice cream maker. These were the people that I had before me. These are the people who took care of me as I was growing up, taking me to church. My cousin Doris Armstrong, her husband, Avant used to come and pick me and my grandmother up and take us to church every Sunday in their car. All those family reunions matter to me.
Just as you're talking and explaining and painting the story for me, the narrative, it allows for a certain type of freedom. It seems that you're free in that meditation on your ancestry. So I'm thinking that's the freedom that allows you to connect to the faith that informs the courage for you to be and to demonstrate confidence, even when there are things about you of which you could be afraid. And I'm thinking about what you say in terms of your Aunt China and, excuse me, your great grandmother China and her resilience. I always think about resilience in a very interesting way, again, through the lens of my psychology training. Is resilience so often divorces an individual from their agency. And I think in terms of defiance, because defiance allows agency to be attached and also demonstrates this learning. And it attaches to what you're talking about in terms with respect to knowledge and the sustenance that it gives you. So for me, your example, your writing, your work, the connectivity that you have to our culture and our ancestry demonstrates this profound and beautiful and artistic defiance. I really thank you for it. I mean, I really, really, really thank you for it.
I appreciate you for that analysis of the work and knowing that you're a very high intellectual, I can tell. Right. I really appreciate that. I will always be this person who I am. I am not afraid of who I come across or who I see. I can talk to the best of them and hold court and have a debate and have a rebuttal. So I am very proud of who I am and who I became as a Black man in this country that's full of injustices and racism. And I am not through yet. And there's a lot in me. However, I will not get the opportunities even today as we go forward. What is that? And you think, yes. Well, what? I'm still going to keep fighting. I'm still going to go on, and I'm still going to maintain and get myself a good deal somewhere, because I'm not going to give up. I'm not going to give up on the institutions that are out there that can offer me a platform to continue my stories and my narratives and my nuance of narrative.
Well, Mr. Talley, I want to thank you so much for joining us and spending time. As I said, I think, I'm sorry. As I said before we even got on camera, I do hope that as
Mhm.
we're able to move about more freely, that
Yeah,
we'll have the opportunity to be with you in person. I think that's
I hope
important.
so too. And let me say, Dr. Rice, I really thank you for your time. You've been very kind. You've shown that you have a great intellectual uh, compass, and I appreciate your questions. And I'm very honored to be on this Chapel Forum. Is it called Chapel?
Yes, Crown Form, which is an evolution of Chapel. Yes, sir. And I also want to thank the Reverend Dr. Calvin O. Butts
But
III, who connected the two of us.
yes, I thank
Um,
you. Yeah.
I think that's so important. And towards the end of your book, and let me the book. So the chiffon trenches, right? So we have this. You got to make sure that we get this. I think it's so important. It's on our book list this year. Um, the movie the Gospel According to Andre, which I love.
I
So,
love.
but in referencing Pastor Butts, one of the things that you talk about is you talk about his example. And I was moved by this through your articulation of it. You say, in his example, I understand and am able to come home. As a sinner slaved by grace, I come home.
Yes, yes, yes.
I think that's so beautiful and so wonderful. I think it's so humbling and frames us so well. And I just want to say thank you and love and faith to
And
you.
love and faith and success to you. And by the way, Dr. Butt says that frequently. I'm a sinner
Yes.
saved by grace and I can come home. We're all sinners.
Yes.
We fall down, but we're saved by grace.
Yes, sir.
Dear old Morehouse, dear old Morehouse, we have pledged our lives to thee, and will ever, yea forever, give ourselves in loyalty. True forever, true forever. To old Morehouse may we be, so to bind each on the other into ties more brotherly. Holy Spirit.